I caught my best friend with my husband at a hotel, so I exposed them and kicked him out, but what happened next destroyed her life and left me drowning in guilt. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. Before the storm, my life was, well, it was the kind of life you see in commercials for life insurance or minivans. Predictable, comfortable, and deeply, deeply good. The kind of life you build piece by piece over the years, the kind you feel a quiet, bone-deep pride in. My name is Carolyn, and for 12 years, I was what you would call happily married to Mark. He wasn't a man of grand gestures or flowery words, but his love was in his actions. He was my rock. He had this calm, steady way about him that made me feel like no matter how chaotic the world got, our little corner of it was safe. I remember how he used to fix things around the house, his brow furrowed in concentration over a leaky faucet or a squeaky door hinge, and how he'd look up and give me that small, tired smile that was just for me, a silent "I've got this." We had 2 wonderful kids, Joshua, who was 10, and Haley, who was 7. They were our whole world, the noisy, vibrant, beating heart of our home. Our house wasn't a mansion, just a simple 2-story colonial in a quiet suburb, but it was filled with the evidence of a happy life: scuff marks on the baseboards from runaway toy cars, Haley's crayon drawings stuck to the fridge with cartoon magnets, the constant, comforting scent of coffee and whatever chaos the kids had cooked up. I loved our Saturday mornings, pancakes, cartoons, and the 4 of us piled onto the couch, a tangle of arms and legs. It was simple, but it was everything. And then there was Brenda. To call Brenda my best friend feels like an understatement. She was the sister I never had, the other half of my thoughts. We met in a crowded lecture hall in college, 2 nervous freshmen trying to find our way, and we just clicked. For 15 years, she was my person. She was my maid of honor, holding my bouquet when I cried during my vows and whispering "you got this" when I stumbled. She was there at the hospital when both my kids were born, the first person besides Mark to hold their tiny, wrinkled bodies. She was Auntie Brenda, the one who always brought the most ridiculously large birthday presents and wasn't afraid to get on the floor and make dinosaur noises with the kids. We had a standing girls' night every few weeks. I remember one, maybe a year before everything happened, we sat on my back porch with a bottle of cheap wine, watching the fireflies. "You know," she said, swirling her glass, "you really have it all, Carolyn. The great husband, the amazing kids, the perfect house." I had smiled. "We have it all," I corrected her. "You're a part of this." And she had leaned her head on my shoulder. "I know," she whispered. "Thank God for that." Our families were completely intertwined. We had barbecues in the summer, spent chilly Thanksgivings together. Mark and Brenda's husband, before they divorced a few years back, used to spend hours talking about sports in the garage. After her divorce, she leaned on us even more, and our home became her sanctuary, her second home. She had a key. She would let herself in, brew a pot of coffee, and be sitting at my kitchen table when I got home from running errands. It was that easy, that comfortable. I truly believed this was my forever. My husband, my children, and my best friend. It was a perfect, beautiful picture, and I was so grateful for it. I was blissfully, idiotically unaware that the 2 people I trusted most in the world were the ones holding the knife that would soon tear that picture to shreds. You know, when a foundation is about to crack, it doesn't usually happen all at once. It starts with a settling, a subtle shift that you can't quite see but you can feel. A tiny, nagging feeling in the pit of your stomach that you try to rationalize away. For me, the whispers of trouble started about 6 months before everything fell apart. It began with Mark's phone. For a decade, his phone was just a tool. It would lie on the kitchen counter, buzzing with notifications that neither of us paid much attention to. But suddenly, it became a fortress. It was always with him, in his pocket, face down on the nightstand, even when he went to take out the trash. It was the first thing he looked at in the morning and the last thing he touched at night. "Big project at work," he'd say with a sigh when I commented on it. Lots of late-night emails from the international team. I believed him, of course. Why wouldn't I? I was his wife. But then the late nights started to become more frequent. It wasn't every night, just often enough to change our routine. Sorry, honey, got held up in a meeting. The team wanted to grab a quick drink after work to de-stress. The excuses were always plausible, but they started to stack up, creating a small wall between us. He grew distant, too. We used to talk in bed for a half hour every night, a sacred time for just us. That slowly faded. He'd be too tired, or he'd be scrolling on that damned phone until he fell asleep, its blue light casting a cold glow on his face. The air between us, once so warm and easy, began to feel thin and strained. Around the same time, Brenda started acting strange. She was always the one organizing our get-togethers, but now she started canceling at the last minute. Oh, I'm so sorry, Carolyn, I'm just swamped with work. Feeling a little under the weather, don't want to get the kids sick. Our daily phone calls, once long, meandering chats, became short, infrequent texts. I remember calling her one afternoon, just wanting to vent about a frustrating day, and she sounded so distracted. I could hear traffic in the background, a horn honking. Where are you? I asked casually. I thought you were working from home. There was a half-second pause. Oh, that's just the TV, she said quickly. Look, I have to go, my boss is calling. Talk later. And she hung up. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid. I was a stay-at-home mom, maybe I was just bored and overthinking things. Mark was stressed. Brenda was busy. People's lives change. One evening, I decided to try and bridge the gap. Hey, I said to Mark as he was getting ready for bed. How about we have a date night this Friday? Just us. Like we used to. He didn't look up from his phone. Can't, honey. Big deadline. I'll probably have to work late all week. He said it so casually, but it felt like a door slamming in my face. The final, definitive crack appeared when I was doing laundry. I was emptying Mark's pockets before throwing his work pants in the wash, and I found a receipt. It was from a little coffee shop, the Daily Grind. I didn't think much of it until I saw the address. It was downtown, miles away from his office, but only 2 blocks from Brenda's apartment. I stood there in my laundry room, holding that small piece of paper, and the whisper in my gut was getting louder. It was no longer just a whisper, it was a warning. And I was too scared to listen. The day my world ended started with an act of love. Or maybe it was an act of desperation. It was a Thursday, and Mark had been particularly distant all week, a ghost in our own home. I decided I was going to fight for us, to break through whatever wall he had built around himself. I was going to surprise him. I arranged for my mom to pick up the kids from school and keep them for the night, a rare treat. I spent an hour getting ready, putting on a silky blue dress he always loved, doing my hair and makeup. I was going to show up at his office at 5 o'clock, a callback to our early dating days. My plan was to whisk him away for a spontaneous dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, the one where he proposed all those years ago. I felt a little thrill of excitement, of hope, picturing the surprised look on his face. The drive to his office was filled with a nervous energy. I turned up the radio, singing along to old songs from college. I was so caught up in my fantasy of a perfect romantic evening that I almost missed the warning signs. I got to his massive glass and steel office building a little after 5. I walked up to the reception desk, my smile already in place. Hi, I'm here to see Mark Johnson, I said to the young woman. She smiled back politely. Oh, Mr. Johnson? He actually left about an hour ago. My smile faltered. Oh. Did he say where he was going? She scanned her computer. He just said he had a family emergency to get to. A family emergency? My blood ran cold. I immediately thought of the kids, my parents. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking. No missed calls. No frantic texts. I walked away from the desk, my heart hammering against my ribs, and called my mom. Mom? Is everything okay? Are the kids all right? She sounded confused, her voice cheerful. Of course, sweetie. We're just about to make cookies. Why? Is something wrong? My relief was quickly replaced by a profound sense of dread. There was no emergency. He had lied. A cold, deliberate lie. I walked out of the building in a daze. Where was he? Why would he lie about something so serious? I got in my car, my mind racing through 100 terrible possibilities. Then, I remembered the Find My Phone app we had on our family plan. We used it to keep track of the kids, a parental safety net. I never, ever thought I would use it to track my husband. With a trembling finger, I opened the app. It felt like a betrayal in itself. My heart pounded in my chest as the little dot representing Mark's phone materialized on the map. It wasn't at his office. It wasn't on the route home. It was in the middle of downtown, at the Grand Alistair, one of the most expensive and romantic hotels in the city. I drove there on autopilot. I don't remember the traffic or the lights. All I remember is the icy feeling spreading through my veins, a desperate mantra playing in my head, it's a work thing. It's a client meeting. Don't be crazy, Carolyn. But I knew. Deep down, in the place where a wife's intuition lives, I already knew. I parked the car and walked into the lobby. It was beautiful, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, and it felt like a funeral parlor. I stood by a large potted plant, my purse clutched in my hands, trying to make myself invisible. My eyes scanned the lobby bar, the plush chairs, the entrance to the restaurant. For a moment, I didn't see him, and a wave of dizzying relief washed over me. See? You're crazy. He's not here. And then I saw them. They were tucked away in a quiet corner, sitting close together on a velvet sofa. He was holding her hand across the small table, leaning in, whispering something in her ear, and she was laughing. That laugh. The laugh I had known for 15 years. The laugh I had shared 1,000 secrets with. It was Brenda. My Brenda. With my husband. I felt the air leave my lungs. The entire world seemed to tilt on its axis, the muffled sounds of the lobby fading into a dull roar. He leaned in further and kissed her, a soft, lingering kiss that was not for a friend. It was a kiss that belonged to me. For a second, I couldn't move. I was frozen, my feet rooted to the marble floor. The scene in front of me felt like something from a movie, surreal and distant. My mind was screaming, no, that's not Mark. That's not Brenda. But my eyes wouldn't lie. It was them. The way his thumb was caressing the back of her hand, the intimate smile she gave him, it was all devastatingly real. Then, a strange, cold clarity washed over me. It was an instinct, an almost out-of-body experience. My hand moved on its own, reaching into my purse and pulling out my phone. My fingers, surprisingly steady, opened the camera app. I zoomed in, my thumb hovering over the shutter button. They stood up then, still holding hands, and started walking toward the elevators. Just as they were about to pass behind a large pillar, Mark stopped and kissed her again, a quick, possessive kiss. Click. The sound was silent on my phone, but in my head, it was as loud as a gunshot. I had it. The proof. A crystal-clear, heartbreaking photo of my husband kissing my best friend. I looked down at the screen, at their two smiling faces, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I had to get out of there. I turned and walked, almost ran, out of the hotel lobby, stumbling out onto the busy street. The city sounds, the honking cars, the distant sirens, were a dull roar in my ears. I somehow made it back to my car and just sat there, clutching the steering wheel. I pulled up the photo again, zooming in on his face, then hers. It was undeniable. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. It was a feeling of absolute emptiness, a hollowing out of everything I had ever believed to be true. My marriage was a lie. My friendship was a lie. My entire life, the beautiful picture I was so proud of, was a fraud. And in my hand, I held the ugly, undeniable proof. The drive home was a blur. I remember pulling into the garage and just sitting in the dark car for what felt like an hour, the engine off, the silence a heavy blanket. The house was empty and quiet, a stark reminder that my children were safe at my mother's, unaware that their world was about to be irrevocably broken. Every object I looked at, a kid's drawing on the fridge, Mark's favorite coffee mug by the sink, felt like an artifact from a different life, a life that was now over. I walked inside and went straight to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand shaking so badly that the glass rattled against my teeth. Then, I waited. I didn't pace. I didn't cry. I stood perfectly still by the kitchen island, a silent, waiting statue, my phone on the counter in front of me, screen dark. The anger was a low, simmering hum beneath my shock, a beast waiting to be unleashed. He came home around 10 o'clock. I heard his keys in the door, the familiar sound now making my stomach clench with a venomous rage. He walked in, loosening his tie, a fake, weary sigh escaping his lips. "Hey, honey." "Long day," he said, not even looking at me properly as he threw his briefcase on a chair. "I am absolutely exhausted. This project is just relentless." I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching him. He finally looked up from unbuttoning his cuffs, sensing the chilling silence in the room. His fake smile faltered. "Carolyn? Everything okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed with pretend concern. "You're quiet tonight." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I simply tapped the screen of my phone, lighting it up, and slid it across the granite countertop toward him. It stopped right in front of him, the screen illuminated with that picture. The picture of him kissing her, their faces oblivious and happy. The color drained from his face. I watched him physically recoil, as if the phone was red hot. He stared at it for a long moment, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish out of water. His eyes darted up to meet mine, and for the first time in months, I saw pure, unadulterated panic. "Carolyn. It's not what it looks like," he stammered. It was the oldest, most pathetic line in the book, and hearing it from him filled me with a white-hot rage I had never known I was capable of. "Not what it looks like," I finally said, my voice dangerously low and steady. "It looks like you, Mark. My husband. Kissing my best friend. In a hotel lobby. After you lied to me about a family emergency. So please, enlighten me. Tell me what it really is." "We were just talking, she's been having a hard time since her divorce, and I was just comforting her." "Comforting her?" I let out a laugh, but it was a harsh, ugly sound that seemed to tear out of my throat. "Is that what you call it now? Is that the comfort you give her?" Because it looked a lot like the comfort you used to give me. I couldn't stay still anymore. The anger was a physical thing, a wild energy coursing through me. I picked up the stack of mail from the counter and threw it on the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. "How long?" I screamed, my voice finally breaking free from its icy prison. "How long have you two been sneaking around behind my back, making a fool out of me in my own life, in my own home?" He just stood there, shaking his head, looking pathetic. "It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I stalked toward him, my finger jabbing hard at his chest. 12 years of marriage, 2 children, a life we built from nothing, you threw it all away for something that didn't mean anything? You stood there and lied to my face, day after day. You are pathetic. You are a coward. He tried to reach for me then, his hands outstretched. Carolyn, please, let's just talk about this calmly. I slapped his hand away with such force that it made a sharp cracking sound in the silent room. The rage was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by an arctic calm. I looked at him, at this man I had loved for half my life, and I felt nothing but disgust. There's nothing to talk about, I said, my voice flat and final. Get your things. I want you out of my house. He looked stunned, his face a mask of disbelief. What? Carolyn, you don't mean that. It's my house too. Where am I supposed to go? A cold, cruel smile touched my lips. I don't know, Mark. And frankly, I don't care. Go to her. Go to your mistake. I'm sure she has room for you. I pointed to the door. Get out. Now. He stared at me, his eyes pleading, but he saw something in my face, the complete absence of love, of pity, of anything but resolve, that told him I was not bluffing. He turned, defeated, and walked toward our bedroom to pack a bag. I stood there and listened to the sounds of him opening and closing drawers, the sound of our marriage being packed away into a suitcase. After Mark trudged out the front door with his suitcase, a profound silence fell over the house. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, filled with the ghosts of everything that had just been destroyed. I stood in the middle of the living room, my body trembling with the aftermath of my rage. For a moment, I just wanted to curl up on the floor and disappear, to wake up and find this was all a nightmare. But there was one more thing I had to do. One more wound I had to cauterize before it became infected. I found my phone, my fingers feeling numb and clumsy as I scrolled through my contacts. I found her name, Brenda. My thumb hovered over the call button. For 15 years, seeing her name had brought a smile to my face. It meant a funny story, a shoulder to cry on, an impromptu coffee date. Now, it was like poison on the screen. I pressed the button. She answered on the second ring, her voice a little breathless, laced with a fake cheerfulness that made my stomach turn. Carolyn? Hey! Is everything okay? It's kind of late. The casual, friendly tone, the pretense that this was just another Tuesday night, was the ultimate insult. The audacity of it. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. My voice was as cold and dead as I felt inside. He's on his way to you, isn't he? There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Then, silence. A long, damning silence that confirmed everything. I could picture her perfectly, standing in her trendy little apartment, her face pale with shock, realizing the game was over. Finally, I heard a small, choked sob. Carolyn, please, let me explain. It's not what you think. Isn't it? I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I have a picture, Brenda. A very clear picture. Of you and my husband. Kissing. At the Grand Alistair. So unless there's some bizarre, undiscovered twin of yours running around, I'm pretty sure it's exactly what I think. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice thick with pathetic, useless tears. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear. It just happened. It just happened? I repeated her words, the venom dripping from my voice. No. Earthquakes just happen. Bad weather just happens. This was a choice. 1,000 little choices. You chose to lie to my face every single day. You sat in my kitchen, drinking my coffee, asking about my kids, all while you were sleeping with their father. You didn't just hurt me, Brenda. You desecrated everything. Our entire friendship. You took something beautiful and you poured poison all over it. Please don't say that, she cried, her voice rising. Our friendship means the world to me. I laughed. It was a hollow, bitter sound that held no humor. No, it doesn't. If it did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You know, the worst part of all this isn't even him. It's you. He broke his vows to me. But you were my sister. You broke my heart. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the final blow. I needed her to understand the finality of this. Our 15-year friendship died tonight. I want you to be very clear on that. Don't ever call me again. Don't text me. If I see you on the street, I will walk right past you as if you are a stranger. We are done. Carolyn, no, please. We can fix this, she begged, her voice rising in panic. But I didn't listen. I ended the call. Then, with methodical precision, I blocked her number. I went to my social media and blocked her there, too. Finally, I opened my photo gallery and started deleting. Pictures from our college graduation, goofy and young. Pictures from my wedding, her smiling brightly by my side. Pictures from countless birthdays and holidays, her arm slung around my shoulder. It was like methodically erasing a part of my own history. Each deleted photo was a small, painful death. When I was finished, I sat in the dark, empty house, completely and utterly alone. The days that followed were a blur of numb efficiency. I operated like a machine, powered by coffee and a cold, burning anger that had become my fuel. There was no time to fall apart, I had children to protect and a life to dismantle. The very next morning, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep, I was on the phone, researching lawyers. I didn't want a mediator, I wanted a shark. I found the best, most ruthless divorce attorney in the city, a woman with a reputation for being brilliant and unyielding. I sat in her sleek, modern office and told her the whole sordid story, my voice never wavering. When I showed her the picture on my phone, she just nodded grimly. This makes things straightforward, she said. We'll file on grounds of infidelity. It gives us leverage. The words, leverage, assets, custody, sounded like a foreign language, but I nodded along, ready for battle. We immediately filed for divorce. We froze our joint bank accounts, and I had a locksmith come to the house to change the locks, a deeply satisfying act of reclaiming my space. Telling people was the hardest part. I started with my parents. My mom just cried, repeating, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," over and over. My dad was silent for a long time, and then he said, in a voice tight with a rage that mirrored my own, "That man will never be welcome in our home again. And as for her, she's no friend of this family." Their unwavering support was a lifeline in that churning sea of chaos. The news spread through our circle of friends like wildfire. My phone was constantly buzzing with texts and calls from friends, their messages a chorus of shock and support. I'm floored. I can't believe Brenda would do that to you, of all people. Are you okay? What do you need? The support was overwhelming, but it was also exhausting. Every conversation forced me to relive the betrayal, to tell the story again and again until the words felt like ash in my mouth. The lines were drawn very clearly and very quickly. Our friends, my friends, sided with me. They were furious, disgusted. I remember running into a mutual friend, Jessica, at the grocery store. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and she rushed over to give me a hug. I heard, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I ran into Brenda last week. I couldn't even look at her. I just walked away. Brenda and Mark became social outcasts overnight. Mark, true to my prediction, had moved in with Brenda. They were a public couple now, a monument to their own treachery. I heard through the grapevine that it was brutal. Friends they had known for years would literally cross the street to avoid them. Invitations to the book club Brenda had been in for a decade stopped coming. They were isolated in the little world they had created, a world built on lies and shame. The most difficult conversation, of course, was with the kids. How do you explain this level of betrayal to a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old? I sat them down in the living room, my heart feeling like a lead weight in my chest. I kept it simple, age-appropriate. Daddy and I are going to be living in different houses for a while, I said, my voice gentle. We both love you very, very much, and that will never change. But we can't be married anymore. Joshua, my serious, perceptive boy, just stared at me, his eyes wide. Why? He asked. Is it because of Auntie Brenda? I heard you yelling. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course, he'd heard. Kids see and hear everything. I just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Haley, my sweet girl, looked from me to Joshua, her little face crumpling as she started to cry. Will we still see Auntie Brenda? She asked. The innocent question was like a knife twisting. I pulled them both into a hug, my own tears finally falling, soaking into their hair. In that moment, holding my children, I knew I had to be strong. I had to get us through this storm. The legal battles, the custody arrangements, the dividing of a life, it was all just beginning. In a strange way, once the initial explosion was over and the dust began to settle, a quiet, grim routine began to form. I had the kids, the house, and a mountain of legal paperwork that my lawyer, thankfully, was handling with brutal efficiency. Mark and I only communicated through curt text messages about visitation schedules for the children. He'd pick them up on Friday evenings, and the handoffs were excruciatingly awkward. He would stand at the doorway, he was no longer allowed inside, and his eyes were always filled with a sad, pleading look that I refused to acknowledge. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. The confident, charming man I had married was gone, replaced by this haunted-looking stranger. I tried not to think about him and Brenda, to block them out completely, but it was impossible. News travels fast in a small suburban town, and people love to talk. My friend Sarah, who lived a few streets over from Brenda's apartment, became my reluctant source of information. I saw them at the grocery store on Sunday, she told me over the phone one day, her voice low as if she were sharing a state secret. They looked absolutely miserable, Carolyn. They were standing in the cereal aisle, and I think they were arguing. He was just pushing the cart with this grim look on his face, and she looked like she'd been crying. Her eyes were all puffy. Another friend, who worked with one of Mark's colleagues, told me that Mark was a wreck at work. He was distracted, missing deadlines, a shadow of his former self. The colleague said Mark had confided in him after a few beers that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. He missed the kids desperately, missed the house, missed me. The stories started to form a picture. Their passionate, secret affair did not translate well into the harsh, unflattering light of reality. The thrill of sneaking around was gone, replaced by the mundane realities of paying bills, doing laundry, and dealing with the constant, crushing fallout of their actions. They were living in her small, two-bedroom apartment, a place that I knew was filled with trendy but impersonal furniture. It must have felt like a cage compared to our spacious family home, a home filled with 12 years of shared history. The pressure on them was immense. They were villains in a town that loved a good piece of gossip. I heard Brenda was having a hard time at her marketing job. An old client of hers, who was also a friend of mine, had pulled their account. She said she couldn't in good conscience continue to work with her. Mark was dealing with his own family's disappointment. His parents, who had always adored me, refused to even meet Brenda. They called me, offering their support and expressing their profound shame in their son's actions. I won't lie, a small, dark part of me felt a grim satisfaction hearing these things. It was karma. They had wanted each other so badly, and now they had each other, along with all the guilt, shame, and public scorn. I imagined their arguments, fueled by stress and regret. I pictured him looking around her apartment and realizing what he had lost. I pictured her, looking at the man she had destroyed a family for, wondering if it was all worth it. The kids would sometimes come home from their weekends with Mark and say things. Innocent, childish things that were like daggers. Daddy and Auntie Brenda were yelling last night, Haley mentioned once while coloring. Daddy sleeps on the couch sometimes, Joshua said another time. Each comment was a small confirmation that the life they had built on the ruins of mine was just as broken. About 3 months after the separation, my life was starting to find a new, fragile rhythm. The divorce proceedings were moving along, slowly but surely. I was deep in paperwork with my lawyer, discussing assets, custody agreements, and my financial future. I was surviving. Some days were an uphill battle, a fight just to get out of bed, but other days, I could feel small flickers of my old self returning. I was focused. Then, one Tuesday night, long after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, my phone rang. It was well after 11. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a spam call, but something made me answer. Hello? There was a pause, then a shaky, slurred voice on the other end. Carolyn? I froze, my hand tightening on the phone. I knew that voice, even through the haze of alcohol. It was Brenda. My first instinct was to hang up, to honor the promise I had made to myself. But a dark, morbid curiosity kept me on the line. What do you want, Brenda? I asked, my voice devoid of any emotion, as flat and cold as a frozen lake. I'm sorry to call, she sobbed, her words tumbling over each other. I know you told me not to. I know you hate me. But I had to hear your voice. I'm so alone. I could hear the distinct clinking of ice in a glass. She was drunk. Very drunk. There's nothing to say, I said, my voice unwavering. No, please, just listen for 1 minute, she begged, her voice desperate. I'm so sorry, Carolyn. You were right. You were right about everything. I've lost everything. My friends, my job, my reputation. Everyone here hates me. They look at me like I'm a monster. I stayed silent, listening to her pathetic, self-pitying monologue. It did not move me. Mark, he's miserable, she continued, her voice cracking. He just sits here, staring at pictures of the kids on his phone. He blames me. He says I pushed him into it, that I ruined his life. We fight all the time. This isn't what I wanted. This life is a prison. And what exactly did you want, Brenda? I asked, my voice sharp and cutting. Did you think you could just take my husband, my life, and that everything would be perfect? Did you think there wouldn't be consequences for your actions? I don't know what I thought, she cried, her voice hysterical. I was stupid. I was so stupid. I miss you. I miss being your friend. I miss our life. That was the line that snapped the last thread of my patience. You don't get to say that, I said, my voice dangerously low. You forfeited the right to miss me when you slept with my husband in secret. My life is not a commodity you can try on and then decide you don't like. Your pain is a consequence of your own choices, Brenda. You built this life for yourself. Now you have to live in it. But I can't, she whispered, her voice barely audible, a desperate, final sound. I can't live like this anymore. A chill went down my spine, a flicker of something that might have been alarm, but I pushed it away. It was manipulation. A drunken, desperate plea for sympathy she didn't deserve. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. That's not my problem, I said, the words coming out like chips of ice. You made your choice. Goodbye, Brenda. I hung up the phone before she could say another word. I immediately blocked the new number. My heart was pounding, a mixture of anger and a strange, unsettling feeling I couldn't name. But I pushed it down. I had stood my ground. I had refused to be her emotional dumping ground. I went to bed that night and, for the first time in months, I slept soundly, believing the worst was finally, truly over. I was so terribly wrong. 2 days passed. 2 quiet, blessedly normal days. The kids went to school, I went to my part-time job at the local library, we had dinner, we did homework. The phone call from Brenda faded into the back of my mind, a final, pathetic whimper from a life I had surgically removed from my own. I was focused on the future. I was even starting to feel glimmers of hope. On Friday morning, I was in the kitchen, packing lunches for the kids. Joshua was at the table, his brow furrowed as he tried to finish his math homework, and Haley was watching cartoons in the living room, giggling at a purple dinosaur on the screen. It was a perfectly ordinary morning. The sun was streaming through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of something that resembled peace. A new kind of normal was possible. Then, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't the mailman, he always came later. It was a firm, official-sounding knock. 2 sharp raps that seemed to echo through the quiet house. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to answer it, expecting maybe a neighbor or a package delivery. When I opened the door, my heart stopped. 2 police officers stood on my porch. They were tall and imposing in their dark blue uniforms, their faces etched with a somber seriousness that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. "Ma'am? Are you Carolyn Johnson?" the older officer asked, his voice calm and professional. "Yes," I said, my own voice barely a whisper. My mind immediately went to the worst places, an accident involving the kids on their way to school, my parents. Is everything okay? "May we come in for a moment?" he asked gently. It wasn't a request. I stepped back, my legs feeling like they were made of jelly, and let them into my entryway. They took off their hats, holding them in their hands. The gesture was so formal, so final, that a wave of pure terror washed over me. "What's happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Please, just tell me." The officer looked at me with eyes full of pity, the kind of look you never want to see from a stranger in uniform. The kind of look that precedes life-altering news. "Ma'am," he began, his voice low and steady. "We're very sorry to have to inform you. It's about an acquaintance of yours. A Ms. Brenda Collins." He paused, and in that split second of silence, I knew. I knew before he even said the words. The world went silent, the sounds of the cartoons and my son's pencil scratching on paper faded away into a dull, rushing roar in my ears. The officer took a breath. "Ma'am, Ms. Collins was found deceased in her apartment this morning. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a tremendous encouragement for me. Please, comment the number 1, and then let me tell you the rest of my story." The officer's words hung in the air, heavy and unreal. Deceased. It was such a cold, clinical word. It didn't make sense. Brenda, with her loud, booming laugh and her dramatic hand gestures, gone? The officers explained that her boss had gotten worried when she didn't show up for work or answer her phone for 2 days, and had requested a wellness check. That's when they found her. They confirmed it was a suicide. They asked me some questions. When was the last time I had spoken to her? What was her state of mind? I answered in a monotone, my mind a blank, foggy landscape, the memory of our last, cruel conversation playing on a relentless loop in my head. That's not my problem. Goodbye, Brenda. I didn't tell them about the call. I was too ashamed, too horrified. When they left, I stumbled into the living room and sank onto the couch, the world spinning around me. A few days later, after the initial shock had worn off and been replaced by a confusing mess of grief and numbness, Brenda's sister, a woman I had met a handful of times at holidays, called me. She was devastated, her voice raw with grief. She told me Brenda had left several letters. One was for her parents. One was for Mark. And one was for me. She asked if I wanted it. A part of me screamed no. I wanted nothing more to do with her, even in death. I wanted to burn it without reading it. But I knew I had to. I had to know what her last words to me were. Her sister dropped it off the next day in a plain white envelope with my name written on the front in Brenda's familiar, loopy handwriting. I sat at my kitchen table for an hour, just staring at it, turning it over and over in my hands, before I had the courage to open it. The letter was 3 pages long, written on the pretty floral stationery I had given her for her birthday last year. My dearest Carolyn, it began. If you're reading this, it means I finally ran out of strength. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did to you, to your family, is the most unforgivable thing a person can do. I just want you to understand, not so you'll forgive me, but so maybe you won't hate the memory of me for the rest of your life. She wrote about how lonely she had been after her own divorce, how she felt like a failure. She wrote about how she started seeing Mark not as her best friend's husband, but just as a man who was kind to her, who listened to her when she felt invisible. She wrote about how their secret coffee meetings, which started as just friendly chats, slowly turned into something more. It was a fantasy, she said, an escape from her own empty, quiet apartment. It was wrong, I know it was wrong from the very first moment. A part of me was screaming at myself to stop. But I was selfish. I was drowning, and instead of learning to swim, I pulled you under with me. I wanted a little piece of the happiness you had, and in the end, I destroyed it all. I never thought it would come out. In my stupid, selfish mind, I thought I could have both, him and you. I never thought I would lose you. The last page was the hardest to read. The ink was smudged in places, as if she had been crying as she wrote it. These last few months have been a living hell. The way people look at me, the whispers. Mark can't even look at me without regret in his eyes. I see how much he misses you and the kids. I think he hates me now. I don't blame him. Everyone I love is gone, and it's all my fault. The night I called you, I was hoping to hear just a tiny bit of the old Carolyn, my friend. I know it was too much to ask. Your silence, the finality in your voice. I knew then that there was truly no way back. I know I don't deserve to be missed, but I just hope you know I always loved you. Your friendship was the best part of my life, and I was the one who threw it away. There was one last line, scrawled at the bottom, as if it were an afterthought. I'm so sorry. Please tell your kids their Auntie Brenda loved them. I dropped the letter on the table as if it had burned my hands. A single, hot tear rolled down my cheek and splashed onto the paper, smudging the ink even more. The anger, the hatred, the righteous fury I had held onto so tightly, was gone. All that was left was a vast, hollow emptiness. And a crushing, unbearable weight of guilt that I knew, in that moment, I would carry for the rest of my life. The funeral was a gray, drizzly affair, the weather a perfect, miserable match for the mood. I didn't know if I should go. My mother told me I didn't have to, that no one would blame me. Was I a mourner? Was I a victim? Was I, in some small, terrible way, a cause? In the end, I went. I felt I owed it to the girl I had met in a crowded college lecture hall, the friend I had loved for 15 years, to say a final goodbye to that person, not the one she had become. I wore black and sat in the very back of the chapel, trying to be invisible. The place was sparsely filled. A few of her family members, red-eyed and clutching tissues. Some old colleagues from her work, looking uncomfortable. Most of our mutual friends had stayed away, unsure of the protocol for mourning the woman who had betrayed one of their own. Then, I saw him. Mark was sitting in the front row with Brenda's parents, a position that seemed both obligatory and grotesquely inappropriate. He looked like a ghost. He was pale and thin, his suit hanging off his frame as if he'd lost 20 pounds. He stared straight ahead at the simple wooden casket, his expression completely blank, but I could see the torment in the tight set of his jaw and the way his hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists on his knees. During the service, I didn't cry. I felt numb, detached, like I was watching a sad movie about other people's lives. But when Brenda's sister got up to give the eulogy, her voice broke as she talked about Brenda's infectious, booming laugh. She told a story about a road trip they took in college, how Brenda had sung off-key to every song on the radio for 5 straight hours. And something inside me cracked. I thought about all the times that laugh had filled my own house, during holidays, during barbecues, during quiet weekday afternoons. The grief hit me then, a sudden, suffocating wave. Grief for my friend, grief for my marriage, grief for the simple, happy life we all had lost. After the service, people gathered awkwardly outside under the gray sky. I tried to slip away to my car, but I saw Mark walking toward me, his steps slow and heavy. It was the first time we had been face to face in a non-confrontational way in months. He stopped a few feet away from me, the drizzle plastering his dark hair to his forehead. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice raspy and low. I just nodded, unable to speak. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, with guilt and blame and shared history. "I read the letter she left for me," he said, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were filled with a pain so deep it was almost black. She blamed herself for everything. For all of it. But it was me, Carolyn. It was my fault. I was weak, and I was selfish, and I did this. I destroyed everything I ever cared about. He looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see the man who had betrayed me. I saw a broken man, drowning in a sea of regret of his own making. I didn't have any words of comfort for him. I didn't have any forgiveness to offer. How could I? "We both have to live with this now, Mark," I said softly. It was the only truth I had left. There were no winners here. Just survivors, left to pick up the pieces of the lives that had been shattered. We stood there for a moment in the rain, two strangers bound together by a tragedy of our own making, before I turned and walked away, leaving him alone with his ghosts. The weeks and months that followed the funeral were a different kind of hell. The sharp, righteous anger that had fueled me for so long was gone, replaced by a dull, persistent ache of guilt. Brenda's last words to me, her whispered, drunken, "I can't live like this anymore," and my cold, dismissive reply, "That's not my problem," echoed in my mind constantly. At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying that final conversation. What if I had been kinder? What if I had told her to get help? What if I had just listened for 5 more minutes? The what-ifs were a relentless form of torture, a prosecutor in my own head that never rested. I was trying to be strong for the kids, to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but I was falling apart on the inside. I would be in the middle of making dinner and would suddenly have to grip the counter, overwhelmed by a memory. I would burst into tears for no reason. I lost weight. I felt a constant, heavy ache in my chest that had nothing to do with a broken heart and everything to do with a broken conscience. I was angry at Brenda for what she did to me, but I was devastated by her death. And I was furious with myself for my role in it, however small or indirect. My mother, seeing the state I was in, finally sat me down at my kitchen table one afternoon. She put her warm hand over mine. "Carolyn, you need to talk to someone," she said, her eyes full of worry. "You can't carry this all by yourself. It's too heavy." She was right. I was drowning. So, with a sense of profound failure, I found a therapist. Walking into that first session felt like a surrender. I sat on the comfortable sofa in her quiet, sunlit office and I told her everything, from the first whisper of suspicion to the police officers at my door. When I got to the part about the last phone call, my carefully constructed composure crumbled, and I broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably into a crumpled tissue. I told her it wasn't my problem, I choked out between sobs. God, who says that to someone? She was telling me she was desperate, she was at the end of her rope, and I hung up on her. My therapist, a kind, older woman named Dr. Evans, just listened patiently, letting me pour it all out. When I was finished, she slid the box of tissues closer to me and said something that I have held on to ever since. "Carolyn," she said gently. "Brenda made a series of choices that led her to that dark place. You are responsible for your actions, and she was responsible for hers. You cannot carry the weight of her final choice. You are a person in immense pain, reacting to an unimaginable betrayal. Your response was a human one. It wasn't a magic cure. The guilt didn't just disappear. But it was a start. It was the first time I had allowed myself to think that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't a monster. The therapy was grueling. We peeled back the layers of anger, grief, and guilt. I learned that my coldness on that final call came from a place of deep, primal hurt. It was an act of self-preservation, a wounded animal lashing out. It didn't make it right, but as Dr. Evans said, it made it human. It was a long, painful process, but slowly, very slowly, through tears and talk, I began the long journey of healing. It's been a little over a year now since Brenda died. The house is quieter than it used to be, a silence that I'm slowly learning to fill with new things, music, the kids' laughter, my own thoughts. It's no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of grief. It's starting to feel like home again, a different kind of home, a home for me and my children. Joshua and Haley are doing okay. They're resilient, as kids often are, bouncing back in a way that amazes me. They still talk about their dad and their Auntie Brenda sometimes, usually at unexpected moments. I've learned not to shut those conversations down. I let them talk, and I answer their questions as honestly as I can, without the ugly details. I tell them that adults sometimes make big mistakes that hurt a lot of people, and that Auntie Brenda was very sad and sick in her heart. They seem to accept that. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. The process was grim but straightforward. Mark was cooperative, he didn't fight me on anything. He gives me a significant portion of his salary for child support and alimony, ensuring the kids and I are financially secure. He sees them every other weekend. Our interactions are brief and polite, focused solely on them. The anger I once felt toward him has mostly faded, replaced by a kind of weary sadness for what we lost, for the family we broke. He's still living a quiet, solitary life. I don't think he'll ever really recover from the weight of his guilt. He's a different man now, quieter, more somber. I'm still in therapy. I've learned to live with the ghosts of the past without letting them consume my present. The guilt is still there, some days it's a dull ache in the background, other days it's a sharp pang brought on by a song or a memory. But it no longer defines me. I've started to find small moments of joy again, laughing with my kids until my stomach hurts, having a long dinner with an old friend, sitting on my back porch with a cup of tea on a sunny morning and just feeling okay. Last week, on the anniversary of her death, I drove to the cemetery. It was a clear, crisp autumn day. I stood in front of her grave for a long time. The headstone was simple, just her name and the dates. I didn't bring flowers. It didn't feel right. I didn't know what to say. The word sorry felt too small, and the word forgive felt too big. I couldn't bring myself to say I forgive you, because I don't think I'm there yet. Maybe I never will be. Instead, I just said, my voice quiet in the breeze, I hope you found the peace you were looking for, Brenda. And as I stood there, a little bit of the weight on my own heart lifted. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acceptance. Acceptance of the whole messy, tragic, heartbreaking story. My life is not the perfect picture it once was. It's scarred and it's complicated. But it's my life. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can start living it again. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, or if you just feel for what happened, please share your thoughts in the comments. It helps to know we're not alone in our struggles.